Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about patch 0.4.0, day 8 of Teaser season. Today, we've got 3 topics we want to discuss. There are a lot of changes to the patch notes, including some nerfs to curses, a rework of Incinerate, a really unexpected buff to grenades, and a bunch of other little changes as well. So that's the patch notes. Secondly, Grinding Gear Games are running an additional MTX promo. I wanted to put all of the information on these into one place, so we're going to talk about both of them. That is the new one announced today, and also a very quick recap of the one related to the Game Awards that are going to be up in less than 24 hours from the time I'm recording this video. After that, of course, there's the question of should you league start a Druid or not? I'm actually going to make the case that no, you probably shouldn't league start a Druid because we don't have enough info about the passive tree, and I think there's a very real risk that you'll feel quite underpowered, but we'll come to that later on. Let's start by going through the patch note changes. Firstly, player changes. Totem placement speed now also scales the speed at which totems emerge. This one actually surprised me it wasn't already the case. I thought it was. I would have been wrong on that one. And this is just one of those really obvious changes that's needed in order for totem placement speed to be a useful stat at all. After this, we have the changes that are being made to curse areas. Now, cursed areas across the board are getting nerfed, and these are not small nerfs. Generally speaking, curse areas are being decreased. Not so much the base areas. The base areas are staying almost the same, but the amount that it can scale with investment is roughly being halved. Curse area passive skills on the passive tree have been halved. They now grant 10% curse area instead of 20%. Zone of Control now grants 20% instead of 40%, although it does have some other effects on it that are getting buffed. Curse area small passives on the Lich and Abyssal Lich, these are getting nerfed, but not quite by as much, down to 15% curse area, previously 25%. Now, all of this is going to make sense when we start talking about the changes that are coming along to Doedre's Undoing. Doedre's Undoing is getting quite the rework, and I think in general it's going to be worse than it was before, but we'll find that out once people get it to endgame. Support gem changes. Second wind gems are getting some small changes here relating to meta skills and also related to second wind 3's life restoration, and the chaos tag that was missing from extraction support is being added. After this, skill changes. Did we say something earlier about curse area scaling by investment in curses being nerfed? Well, here's more of that. Temporal chains, Ellie weakness, enfeeble, vulnerability, despair, and inevitable agony. All of these, the amount that their radius scales per gem level above 20 is being nerfed substantially. So this is going to be from 10 centimeters per level to 10 centimeters per 3 levels. All of this, again, is because of Doedre's Undoing, and Doedre's Undoing is also getting a rework. It's no longer going to scale off intelligence, it is instead going to scale based upon the supported curses level. So this is intended to provide new options for scaling that. Instead of being forced into intelligence stacking, you're now forced into gem level scaling instead because gem level is such a strong stat. Anyway, that's being reworked. We don't have hard numbers on this, so we don't know whether it's going to be any good or not. Main thing I would say here is wait and see. If you're interested in playing around with Doedre's Undoing, wait and see unless you're someone who is willing to be a trailblazer and try and figure it out yourself. Firestorm. Firestorm is getting buffed. Firestorm is getting buffed quite a lot. So let's start with the changes to base damage. Base damage is doubling. However, it's important to note that this is not all upside because there is a little bit of a nerf elsewhere. This is still a buff overall though. Storm radius is now 3 meters, previously 2.8 meters. This one sounds like it's an unconditional buff. However, it actually isn't. The reason for that is it means that the projectiles that fall down, more of them are going to miss. So now it's going to be spread over 9 pi square meters, whereas previously it was spread over 7.84 pi square meters. So what this means is that the number of projectiles that hit any given location is approximately going to be nerfed by 13 or 14%. This is still a buff overall because of the additional damage. Now, other changes. Fire Infusion. This is getting changes here. So it is going to cause less of an increase in bolt frequency than it used to cause. It is going to cause less of an increase in radius than it used to cause, although it's worth noting that this almost ends up at exactly the same as it used to be. And Fire Infusion now grants 100% increased damage. All in all, I think this is mostly a wash, but something that should have better performance than it did before. Cold Infused bolts, these are just objectively better, they're getting more damage. Lightning Infused bolts, these are just objectively better, they're getting more damage. This is a significant suite of buffs to Firestorm overall, but it will not be a buff on every single possible cast that you could ever make of the skill. So Firestorm itself is better without infusions, it's better with infusions, but one thing that's important to note is that if you are doing a tri-infusion playstyle on Firestorm, that is going to be much harder to pull off than it was in 0.3.1 and 0.3.0, and that's because of the redesign of Elemental Equilibrium, which was discussed in the patch notes generally. The redesign of Elemental Equilibrium means that you are not going to be able to just generate one type of infusion and rely upon Elemental Equilibrium's randomization of them in order to get all the benefits. If you want to use all three types of infusions, you have to generate all three types, with or without EE. That said, the skill is better than it was in 0.3.0, which is something it needed because it wasn't very good in 0.3.0. Mirage Archer. Creating a Mirage now has a 10-second cooldown. The cooldown starts when a Mirage is created and is no longer reset by dodge rolling. You can now have multiple Mirages active at once. Mirage base duration goes from 5.4 to 6 seconds at various gem levels. Previously, it was different to that. It was 4.4 to 5. So this is one of those cases where Grinding Gear Games are raising the skill floor and lowering the skill ceiling. The old Mirage Archer was something that incentivized playing with a metronome beside you. So if you knew that your cooldown was 6.00 seconds exactly, then you might set a metronome to tick every 1,230 milliseconds. That's one of those physical to mechanical devices that people use in music. And then every 5 ticks, you know, is 6.15 seconds. So you could get into a rhythm where if you do have a Mirage Archer spawn, then you count out the 5 ticks, and then if you get it exactly right, then your only downtime is 150 milliseconds every 6.15 seconds. That's manageable. Even if you're slightly off, hopefully you're not early, because being early was crushingly punishing on the original design of Mirage Archer. Well, all that is gone. Now it's just a straightforward cooldown. 10 seconds expires, you can make a new one. You can try to find ways to improve your cooldown recovery, or you can try and find ways to extend the duration of Mirage Archer, and this will allow you to get more benefits out of it. All in all, I think I really like this simplification here. It is a simplification. In the hands of the very best players out there, this might be a nerf, but for most people, I think this is going to be an improvement. Mortar Cannon getting some minor animation changes. And then we have Oil Grenade. Now, there are 2 lines related to Oil Grenade. One of them will come up later. We're going to talk about that one later, but this is really substantial. Item changes. Curse area of effect mods on jewels have been nerfed. Regular jewels now grant half what they used to, up to a rounding error. Timeless jewels now grant exactly half what they used to. Again, all of this relates to curse area of effect just being across the board nerfed. Doedre's undoing. We'll see how that ends up. Unique item changes. Sands of Silk. This grants the level 15 to 20 blink skill, and now it's going to allow you 3 uses of this rather than 1. This is a pretty substantial buff. And next we have Prism Guardian. Prism Guardian is getting a number of changes as well. So currently +1 maximum spirit per 25 life, and it also has a number of other stats on it. So the other stats are staying the same as they were before. However, it is now getting some really, really substantial other changes. This is a downgrade of this item if you are using it for minions, which I don't think many people were. And if you're using it for buffs, it is probably going to be an upgrade. You are going to now have 50 flat spirit and 1% spirit reservation efficiency of buff skills per 100 maximum life. There will be configurations, there will be precise amounts of life where this is worse than the old situation was, but I think those will be few and far between. This is now going to be a pretty strong item for a lot of situations. Prism Guardian might actually be quite a chase item in this league, which you'll have to see on that. Something I think is really important to keep in mind with this item, there's a couple of really dull and boring stats that it has, but it has a lot of them. So dexterity, boring stat, you got to get it somewhere. Elemental resistances, boring stat, you've got to get it somewhere. Prism Guardian actually provides quite a lot of that, but it does so alongside a good rest of the package as well. So this is a good item, and it's probably going to be better in most circumstances. Next up, we have bug fixes. Fix a bug where fire infusion stats were not applying to ice and lightning bolts of Firestorm. That explains a lot. That is something else that was making Firestorm feel worse than the printed numbers on it. Fix several bugs allowing stats affecting charge gain to effectively double dip. Chances to gain additional charges now only roll before effects that can change the type of charges gained, such as the Resonance Keystone. Previously, it could roll twice, once before and once after. Similarly, both the above effects are only checked before effects that cause other things to gain your charges for you, such as the conduit keystone. This means only the original charge generator's stats affect the type and number of charges that they give out in this way. So if you were playing charges straight, if you were playing them without any shenanigans going on, then charges are going to work the same way they did before. If you are playing with some very, very bug-feeling shenanigans and you're getting double dipping on charges because of that, then that's not going to work anymore. And fix a bug where Vaulting Impact and Thunder Asleep could not be animation cancelled. After this, we have 5 skill gems that were already mentioned that they were getting changes, but now there's further changes to them. Ice Nova, Cold Infused Ice Nova Explosion and Chill Ground Radius are now 50% more radius than they used to be. So that's 125% more area than they used to have. 4.8 meters base, that is huge. Like, that is an absolutely massive part of the screen, whereas previously it was 3.2 base. Cold Infused Ice Nova now deals slightly more damage at all gem levels, something like 11, 12, 13% more damage than it used to do. Raise Zombie. Creating a zombie from a power charge now also generates 2 additional non-empowered zombies. Empowered Zombie now deals 122 to 253% more damage with hits at gem levels 5 to 20. Previously, it was only 100. So basically, this is an incentive to feed your power charges to your zombies. If you want to do that, there's a payoff for it. If you're not interested, well, you can just use Raise Zombie otherwise. Incinerate, complete and utter rework here. So just forget everything you knew about Incinerate. This is kind of a new skill now. So this is dealing a certain amount of fire damage per second. The amount of fire damage that it does is very, very low. 11.1 fire damage per second at gem level 1, scaling to 57.5 at gem level 20. However, it has a lot of other crazy mechanics going with it, and it wouldn't surprise me if this ends up being a lot better than it looks. Ignited ground duration is now 8 seconds, previously 4. Now has ignites from a single use of this skill compound if they are not caused by ignited ground. And so this is Editing God clarifying what exactly that compounding text means. What this means is that your ignite deals damage as though it's all of the hits. So for instance, if you have 75 inclinations of damage from this, then it's going to deal damage as though it is one hit that is 75 times as large, rather than being 75 individual little hits where the ignites don't really stack with each other. Quality now grants 20% more ignite duration, previously ignite magnitude. That is probably a nerf in most situations. Now gains 7 to 2 milliseconds of fuel per mana spent, previously 10 to 5. So you're getting considerably less fuel than you used to get. Now you can only store 5 seconds of fuel. Previously you could store 10 seconds of fuel. Now no longer has multiple maximum stages or deals 30% more damage per stage. No longer has 50% less ignite duration. No longer has inflicts 80% less flammability magnitude. Now instead it ignites as though dealing this particular amount of damage. These numbers are considerably lower than they used to be. However, again, all of this comes down to the fact that it is gaining that one new critical line. And that is ignites from a single use of this skill compound if not from ignited ground, and Incinerate ignites every 75 milliseconds. So if you can point the flamethrower at a monster for 1.5 seconds, you're going to stack up 20 of these ignites. Each one of these ignites is only dealing 20% or so of the damage that they used to do. Actually, it's a bit less than 20%, but you're getting 20 of them. So you're looking like you're dealing 3.5 times the damage you used to do. That's pretty significant. And there's a lot of other things going on with it. Essentially, really complex skill, something you could potentially mess around with, but this is one to maybe sit back and wait. Don't league start this. If you want to really play around with Incinerate, then have a plan to respec into it, or alternately, do what I'm doing with my Druid. I'm not league starting a Druid. I am going to get to endgame, and then I'll pick up leveling items, and then I'll level a Druid with those. That's the sort of thing you might want to do if you're wanting to play around with Incinerate. I feel like this is a very, very risky skill because it has new mechanics that work together in ways that we didn't know before. And as a result, it's just going to be really hard to work out how to use it well. Ice Shot. Conversion on this is now higher than it used to be. This is a very good thing. Cone angle is increased, which means that you'll have more damage projection. Now has 25% more freeze buildup. And then we have the damage aspects of this, which are quite complicated. So the initial hit damage looks like it's getting a substantial buff here. 296% raised up to 344%. So you're probably thinking that's a 16% more multiplier, right? Well, There is also this change where quality is now going to grant 30% more magnitude of chill inflicted rather than 20% more attacks. So when you factor these two out together, this is a very small nerf to the initial hit damage that you're getting out of Ice Shot. But then we have the secondary effect, which is the shards. These are getting unconditionally buffed. All in all, is this skill better than it used to be? Is it worse than it used to be? It is better than it used to be, but it is not quite going to be better in every imaginable situation that you could ever dream up. Just, it is generally a better skill. And after this, we have a buff I certainly did not expect. I thought that the crossbow grenade interactions were something that might take a nerf in this patch. I didn't think they'd get crushed, but I thought they might get nerfed a little bit. No, instead, oil grenade is getting a buff, and this was already a skill that was good enough to use. In fact, it's kind of getting a lot of buffs. So cooldown, buffed from 5 seconds to 4 seconds. Oil and oil ground duration, buffed from 5 seconds to 6 seconds. This is kind of a nothing burger buff. Damage on this is being gigabuffed, 163 to 408% at gem level 20. Oil ground has, once ignited, oil ground adds 150% of this attack's fire damage as unscalable damage to the ignite. Oil now slows enemy movement speed by 40%, previously 20%. Everything about this is substantial, and this was already a usably good skill, so lots of things there to keep in mind. Anyways, that is the first section of the video, talking about the new changes of the patch notes out of the way. Right, so the next topic I wanted to cover is the question of how to start a druid in 0.4.0, or in fact, why I am not starting one, and why I think that you should at least give some serious thought to this approach as well. So we have seen some gameplay footage in the last 24 hours, I'll put a link to it down in the description below, of Ziggy D playtesting the druid. There are a couple of very important caveats that I want to raise about that footage. The first one is that gameplay footage can change. So if you have a look at Ziggy D's 3.27 Kinetic Rain footage, it was absolutely dominant. Then Kinetic Rain ended up coming live to the servers in a usable but not overpowered state. The version that Ziggy D had been playing around with earlier was completely overpowered, and the alpha testers correctly picked that up, and what came out to the live servers as weaker. The second thing I want to point out though is that Ziggy has extraordinarily good equipment in this video. Most notably, he has a phenomenally good weapon, +2 to the level of all melee skills, 20% quality, and 1 physical damage enhancing explicit modifier on it. So this combination of mods is far better than you would normally have in Act 1, and he has it by the time he gets to Lachlan. What this means is that pretty much anything you play, if you've got that degree of equipment on your character, you are going to dominate Act 1. What this means is that we can't tell whether Ziggy D's incredible power, when he's fighting against Count Geonor, when he's fighting against some of the other bosses like Candlemas late in Act 1, whether this is due to the druid being extremely strong or whether it's due to his gear being really good. Now, you can get gear on this level if you do a lot of side content. Exactly what Ziggy D did. He played around with all of the incursion content while he was making that, and as a result, he built that weapon. It's not like he just got a really lucky drop. He earned that by spending time doing side content. Maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't. But the reason I am most apprehensive about League starting a druid is that in Act 1, there's not really that much difference between a really well put together build and a really poorly put together build. The really well put together build might have 15 points spent on its passive tree and get full value out of all 15 of them. The less well put together build might have 15 passive points, but really only get the benefits of 12 of them because 3 of them are spent just suboptimally. You know, maybe you spend 5 passive points picking up a cluster that's only really worth 2 points. You end up just a little bit below the power curve. The thing is, that's Act 1. What happens when you get to 100 passive points later in the game? Well, the really well put together and optimized build ends up with 100 well spent passive points. The wing it build ends up with 100 passive points that are not very optimally spent and probably ends up getting the power level of perhaps 80 passive points. So here, they're 20 passive points in power behind the optimized build. Additionally, the optimized build is going to have gear that is perfect for the build they're playing, and support gems that are perfect for the build they're playing. The unoptimized setup might have actually more items to choose from, but they're just going to pick a few wrong ones. So, with the druid, we don't have enough information to design good builds at the moment. This is just a fact. If anyone puts out a video saying this is the best build for a druid in 0.4.0, that person is not being truthful. That person is producing bait. And that's why I want people to keep that in their mind when they're deciding whether they want to start a druid or not. The first druids that get to endgame are going to be quite a bit weaker than the best druids that can be made right now. On the flip side, if you play something that's safe, tried and tested, you might not end up with the perfect grenade-based mercenary build, but you end up with something that's pretty close to perfect. Only a couple of points wasted, and you'll end up with something that's really solid. So what does this mean for people that want to experience the druid? Well, my approach is going to be simple. My first character is going to be a grenade mercenary, because that is a build that I know is quite powerful. Once I get to endgame, I'm going to be able to pick up all of the leveling uniques that I want, and then I can go ahead and level a new character, which will be a druid, and do all the really experimental stuff. But I can do it from a position of having a bit of an economic base in the league, so that if it turns out that my druid is absolutely terrible, I'm not set back 20 hours by that mistake. I'm set back maybe 5 or 6. And that is my goal there. I have a fallback plan in place. Now, do you need to copy this exactly? No. But I just suggest that you consider it. Consider league starting something that's tried, tested, and true. And then if it turns out that that is not the playstyle that you want to go across the druid, you'll have the resources to do so more quickly. Anyways, if it does sound like fun though to fumble through the campaign on a character that's probably suboptimal, then by all means, go ahead and do that. I did personally have fun doing that in 020, but this time I want to go with something a little bit more optimized. Okay, so now I mentioned there is an existing MTX promotion that had been announced before, and there is also a new one. Let's quickly recap that during the Game Awards, Grinding Gear Games are doing something. This is different to how they've done MTX promos in the past. I did cover this on one of the previous days, but I think it was the one where I had really crankled sound issues. So the Druids of the Magi Portal Effect, you'll be able to get this one. The exact time is linked down in the description below. So for me in Australia, it's 11 AM on Friday. But for those of you that are in the United States, this will be on Thursday, and it'll be sometime in your afternoon or evening. The exact time will be listed in your particular time zone, and that link is down in the description below. All you need to do is tune in to the Game Awards and watch for 30 minutes during this period, and you'll get the Druids of the Magi Portal Effect. Now, that requires you also to do a little bit of administrivia linking your account with Twitch. After that, there is also a support a streamer promo that they're running. These things are absolutely fantastic for those of us that stream. Now, if you want to get the Battle Hardened Warbear Shapeshift effect, then you can gift a sub either to me or to anyone else that's a Path of Exile 2 content creator during the Game Awards ceremony, and this will become available to you as well. Again, there's a little bit of administrivia, so check into this. Note that that is not during League Start. That is during the Game Awards. So that is many hours before League Start takes place. I think it's 19 hours before League Start, but don't trust my word for it. Check out the actual GGG article. After that, there is another promo that they're running, and one of these is fantastic. So I really like the Blood Moon level up effect here. Play in the Fate of the Vaal League, so make a new character in the new Challenge League during the free weekend, and there are 3 cosmetics that will be made available to you upon reaching certain thresholds within Act 1. Get to the Cliffell encampment, and you will get this helmet attachment that looks like a smoking pipe. Kill a Rotten Druid in the Grim Tangle in Act 1, and you will receive this Magus Tome hip attachment. Fair warning on this boss can be avoided, so don't avoid this boss if you're wanting to get this MTX. And then kill Geonor at the end of Act 1 in order to get the Blood Moon level up effect. The Blood Moon level up effect is cool, so this is definitely one that is a significant payoff. These are not something that are temporary MTX only during the free weekend. These are things that will stay around on your account. Anyways, that is the news that we've got today. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results. And if you do decide to League Start a Druid, all the best with it. I hope you end up building it well.